the internet. Yes, this is Spirit Journey. Oh, this is going to be part two. My apology. I said the R word and then it shut off. It shut off on me, the live stream. So I cannot say uh, Kirk's full name, and I can't say the word RASI. Oh God, I can't remember. um, isms. RASISM. I can't say that word. It glitches. So my apology. Yes, this is a continuation on about my experience and the biases that occurs in America. And the answer to everything is love, Love. Love is the answer of everything. And this live stream is just about talking about my experiences, stories that were told to me. And I was just recounting a story that my mother was telling me many years ago, and her experiences, and about what life was like a long time ago. And I mentioned already that in America 100 years ago, that the U.S. was not discriminating against black entry in America. They were letting black people in the droves. My grandparents from the Caribbean, and they were allowed many. And if you look at the like ancestry.com, they have like you know records of the immigration, people from all over the world, all over the Americas, people of color, as they would call it now. Yes, I'm back online. I'm back on. Thank you for coming back and listen to my video. Yeah, I got cut off. I got cut off from the live stream because I said the R word, and it almost happened when I said the CK word. Again, this live stream is the answer to everything in America and the planet is love. So this is just to share my experiences, my feelings, and what I've been hearing since CK's unalivement. It's just my thoughts and my experiences and the experiences of people who I know, things that I've witnessed. That's what this is going to be about. And the last thing I was talking about before I got hung up on with the live stream, uh, that stories of what happened to my mother. And again, my mother looks like a white, what you would call a white person, but she's a mixed race. And she was raised as an American, and she went to Catholic school up to just until high school. High school, she went to regular public high school. So she had a foundation, and they were poor. They were poor, but she had it somehow enough money. My grandparents had enough money to send her to Catholic school. Um, I guess it's also priority too. And I am surprised. But again, in those days, things might have been, they were considered poor, but my family's, my, how do you say this? They weren't rich, but they had dignity. They had a respect for themselves. They were just who they were. And they didn't walk around just feeling like a victim. And I guess because of what those grandparents looked like on my mother's side, they were very light skinned and straight hair. Um, they're a little bit more socially mobile, but we did find the census of them. What was that? It was in 19, let's see. I think it was the 1940 census. Yeah. And they were classified as black in the census. So I thought that was interesting because they looked so Caucasian, but they were classified as black that I saw. That was surprising. But either way. Um, so they I think that the perspective, where, you just you are who you are, in their experience, their understanding of life. And yes, well, my mother went to go to, find out about becoming a nurse. The official said, ask her, are you black? And my mother didn't know the answer because it's not something that people asked each other back then. And because the lady official said, if you're black, you can't become a nurse here, which is odd because this was a public school, and people went to school. Things were very neighborhoody, and this was in downtown Brooklyn. Downtown Brooklyn is heavily black. Oh, people call a lot of people from the a lot of everything, a lot of people from the Caribbean. But this is what my mother said. This was in the early 50s, early 1950s. Um, she asked her father about it. Hey, what are we? Are we black? And his response was, you are what people think you are. Something like that. So I think something like that he said. And that was it. And he too was someone, my mother looked like his father, her father. And um, so for him, his survival was because, he was able to blend in. He was a cook. He worked on a ship as a merchant seaman. And there's a photo with him with the other people on the ship, and they were the same color as he. You would not know. They were all the same complexion in the photo. So that is telling. And so, um, again, this is his perspective, you know. Um, but my looking at that, why are they all the same coloring? Wouldn't it be funny that if all of them were just light-skinned blacks? You know, that would be something. But either way, that could be telling. So yes, was there racism in America back in the 1950s in New York City? Sure. As for my father's very dark skin, and his family has a different angle. And I would say my instinct was that the dynamics with my father's side, everything was about race and racism or colorism. Quite different outlook. And my father used to share the story. His mother would tell him, you have to be the best. You have to be the best. And so um, she was letting him know that to make it in America, you had to be the best. And my father was the best at what he did. He graduated numbered either number two or number three in his graduating class in high school. And it was a big, big, big high school, a very large high school. I don't remember the high school he went to, but it was a major high school. And many of the people were children of immigrants. Many of the people were white. Um, and I saw my father. My father had a photocopy of his yearbook. And I didn't know my father had credentials in that yearbook. He was involved in everything, and I thought, wow, because I didn't know that aspect of him. Because I always heard bad things. That his social his family life was challenging. A lot of unpredictability, stress, fear and hunger. And they were from a larger family in America. Um, so that too, you have a lot of kids back to back live in the same household. So there was more people to be fed, and so less money during the time of the Depression. And that's all you really heard about my father's side. Oh, we were hungry, we were so poor, blah blah blah. Uh, and so that was his reality. And him being very very dark skinned, and another dynamics. But he seemed to flourish in school. He flourished in school. Um, let's see what else. Oh, I remember my father told me a story about, let's see, he was an artist in school. He majored in art. And, oh, I hope I'm not getting stories, whether it was high school or college. Okay, yeah, I'm not 100% sure now. Was it something in college or high school? But either way, he was to go in a competition. He was a he was good in sculpting. Yeah, his 3D was excellent. I would say that. His 3D, clay sculpting, in my opinion, he was excellent. Uh his painting, um I thought his sculpture was I think his best talent, but he was good, but I personally liked his sculpture work was phenomenal. But either way, his instructor told my father that he wanted another person to go in the competition and not him. And the other person, the professor or the instructor wanted, it was a white male. And he was angry. And my father's telling me that he just wanted a win. He wanted at least one win in his life. And that was his prayer. Yeah, they didn't want my father to compete, and because I think they knew he was going to win, but they didn't want him to win. And I'm sure it had a racial component to it. I wish I could remember more to the story, but that my father's told no, you can't compete. But there was a national competition or something, and he entered it. He did that prayer. And he did a sculpture of his sister. He did a bust of his sister, Aunt Gwen. And yeah, a bust is like a statue of the head, like the shoulders and the head. Yeah, just that top part. And he won every competition. Every competition. When he won the first one, I think it was like a local competition, I guess New York City. And then I remember he was telling me, um, up to the Mississippi River. And my father's sculpture won. Yep, he told me that. So yes, there are times, life may try to hinder you, but it's what you do with what you have, and to push forward. And I'm glad my father didn't uh, stop. And even though, he had a very challenging mother, very, um, she taught him the essential. You have to be the best. And I guess, yeah, and back in those days, in New York City didn't have legal segregation, but things were socially segregated. People hung out with people from where they were from. You were Irish, you hung around with other Irish people. You were Italian, you hung around with the other Italians. You were from the Anglo Caribbean. You hung around with other Anglo Caribbeans. You're black from the South. You hung around with blacks from the South. You know what I mean? So it was more of that that dictated New York City. So people were in their neighborhoods. And people really didn't go outside of their neighborhoods. And the colleges in New York City were all integrated. Okay, New York City did, the schools were integrated. Uh, let's see what else. Um, so I mentioned this story about my father. So yes, one's appearance can dictate a lot of things about your experiences in life, especially if you're a black person or you're a darker skinned black person or you're a lighter skinned black person, and different perspective, different experiences based on that. People did judge you by your appearance, but in spite of that, people still were educated. And I things started changing, it seemed, when you had the Civil Rights Act. Um, yeah, the Civil Rights Movement. By that time, when the Civil Rights Movement came about, my parents were already married. They married and they started their family right away. Also, my father was in the back then. I think he entered the military in 52 or 53. Yeah, maybe 50, could have been 51, 51, 52. And yeah, when he gets out the military and he goes back to school, my father, yeah, college. Yeah, my parents met in college the first year. And then he got what do you call it? What do you call it when you get back in those days, it was mandatory. And that notice came in the mail and he had to go in, he went into the Marines. And then one year, him being in the Marines, he married my mom. And then the year later, he's out. And then they start their family. So initially, they stayed with her parents, my mom's parents. And my mom talked to her local leader, the community leader, because they need a place of their own. And he recommended this, but she gets an apartment in Brooklyn with my parents, and I think she was pregnant at the time. And they got their own little apartment. People were just my parents, just went with the flow, and they just did what was expected of them as Americans. You got an education, and you stay in your social circle. Um, but there were racism. Yeah, my father, when he was in the military and in uniform, and it was a place in Maryland, I think it was. Maryland or DC. I think it was Maryland. And yes, it was part of the Jim Crow there in Maryland, definitely. And they went to a dance. And um, because my parents don't look like the same color, they're both people of black heritage. My father's very dark skinned. My mother was very, very light skinned and looked like a white person. And so when they went to go to the dance, they were excluded. They said, "Oh, you can't go to this one." So they had to find another place, I guess, a black place. Yeah, because my father couldn't go in. They couldn't go in because of what my father looked like. So yes, there is segregation, and that was Maryland in the early 1950s. Um, but fast forward, father gets out of the military, and he continues his college education, and somehow my father And again, the babies were coming. My mother was a Catholic, a nominal Catholic. And back in those days, the Catholic Church did not allow contraception, and so nature happens, right? And so the babies came. I'm one of seven children, but my father was a student. By the time I was born, I think he was still in school, college. He worked in the day. He worked in the Brooklyn Navy Yards. He did like construction there at the Brooklyn Navy Yards. And then at night, he went to college. And somehow I saw like he had a den at home. Uh, and he has his degrees hanging on the wall. And I noticed, I said, wow. I said, Ma, he he finished in 2 years his master's. Yeah, he had his undergraduate, master's, and then his certification. And he fit I said, "Mom, how did he do it that fast?" Because I was like, it took me forever. He had 7 ass kids, a wife, a full-time job, and my mother did not work. My mother, excuse me, she was what you call a housewife in those days, 1950s and 60s, and part of the 70s. My mother was a housewife. So, how did this happen? How could this happen? Um, how did he finish so, how is it that my father, as black as he was, and he was very tall, or considered he was over 6 feet, big bone boy. Yeah, when he got married, boy, he gained weight, honey. He used to be so tall and slim, and then when he got married, boom. Yeah, just saying. Um, but yeah, so what happened? Well, and the civil rights movement happened, and uh, it seemed like everything went downhill after the civil rights movement. And that guy CK, I have to call him CK, the person who was unalived about almost a week ago, the uh, Christian fellow. He was unalived by an assailant, a 22-year-old guy. Wow. Very sad about that. Again, my condolences for his family and his friends. Um, yeah, I did not know CK. I didn't know about his work, but coincidentally, I heard his name less than a week before his passing. I know I did. Yeah, I heard his name mentioned. Um, but either way, since his passing, I was looking at videos with him, and I'm really impressed about his speaking, about his debate ability. Wow. I saw like 2 um, debates. That guy had his act together, boy. I was highly impressed. And he was talking to someone about, it was a black fellow, young black fellow in the audience. And I understood that black fellow. He had a victim mindset, and he was dressed very, what you would say, youthful. But what characterized him that he can't do this, he can't, what everybody's doing to him. He had a victim mentality, and so did I. Oh yes, I was able to relate to what he was saying. That victim part, and he was saying that it's systematic isms. I can't say that R word because I got uh, censored in my live stream. And so that's why I had to do it over, do a part two. This is the part two. So I can't say the R word either. Um, and so he asked him a question. Um, oh, how did he word it now? CK. He asked specifics. And he said, I thought this was interesting. I don't remember the whole thing, but I remember what stood out to me. The black fellow said, "Oh, they call him the N word," and he says, "You," and then CK said, "They said that to you, pejoratively against you, specifically at the school." He was going to a school in Texas. And then he backtracked. Oh well, I mean, not exactly. Then so CK called him out and said, "What do you mean, not exactly? Either they said the N word to you pejoratively, to you, because he said um, white people. Well, the CK said white people do not have the same rights, the ability. I don't want to misquote, but in essence, CK was saying that Black America can say things and get away with it than if a white person says the same thing, such as the N word or generalities like all such and such people, this or that. He can't say that. And I think he's correct, CK. And so he said, and then he called him out on it. The CK called him, the black fellow, out on it that, see, you lied. So you're lying. And when you say things like that, oh, someone called the N word, and then you say, oh, no, not really. They didn't say it like that. But he was misleading the audience. Like everywhere he goes, that white people say the N word to him. Um, and again, this is a young black fellow. And in my experience, again, I'm not from Texas. I lived in New York City, and at least in New York City, I don't hear white people saying the N word. But growing up in the 1980s, it wasn't advisable for a black person to go into certain neighborhoods because you will get beaten. Yes. But um, nowadays, in New York City, especially Manhattan, that's where I lived. It's just so many everything. You wouldn't have. I've never seen that sentiment. No, I never. I've never heard a white person say the N word in Manhattan, but I do hear black people say the N word all the time, all the time, and it gets me angry. I remember I went to the beach in Far Rockaway Beach. That I used to live in Far Rockaway. Far Rockaway is in Queens, and it's a beach town actually, and it's very socially segregated. It's the project. What do you call the project? They're affordable units, affordable housing, and they're apartments, but they call them now the projects, and they're known for extreme crime. But my parents moved to Queens uh, before I was born, and we lived there in the projects in f- oh, how can I Far Rockaway, Queens. Oh gosh, what was my point about Far Rockaway? Yeah, it was it's not considered a ghetto. One of the worst places in Queens, a high crime neighborhood. Um, oh, what was my point of mention about this? Oh, I hate that when I'm start talking and I get distracted there. But yeah, certain areas, you stay in. Oh yeah, um, that part of Queens, it was a start off. startup community. It was created for people just starting out, like my folks. You go there, and then you save money, and then you go buy a house, like my parents did. Yep, 7 kids in a 3-bedroom apartment. No matter how you slice it, um, it's crowded, and they were they were my. I was told late in life, before my father passed. I think he was telling me this story, that they were always short about $7,000 for everything, $7 or $9,000, something like that amount. And my grandfather had passed, and he was given money, like I guess like an inheritance or some money that he had, and it was to go to my father. And that was the breaker to get them over that hump and to get their dream house. And yes, the dream house was in Queens. It was owned by a doctor, and he was moving out, I think, to further out in Long Island, New York. It was an old community, white community. It used to be a predominantly all white community, and in the 1950s, it started changing. And by the time the 1960s, 1967, it was predominantly all black. Our neighbors were white. Yeah, our next door neighbor was a older white lady. Across the street, there were white families, but they were older ladies, white ladies. And eventually they moved, and it became all black. So yes, you do have that, what they call white flight. But either way, um, blacks moved in. A lot of the social structure also fell. Um, Somehow, in black neighborhoods in New York City, um, when you have this transition from white to black, the infrastructure goes, the school system goes. Why is this? What happens? I think in part, um, yes, the social structure it interfered. The funding may have changed, but again, the now the prices of the homes, you pay good money for those houses, but that infrastructure left. Um, so how do you get built up that infrastructure when you move into when white flight happens? What do you do? What do you do as a black community for a school system, for services like picking up the garbage? Basically, the neighborhood was pretty nice. They were homeowners, but further down in the town that I lived in, or village that I lived in, um, it was real, storefronts, and that's where you had the real poverty. The stereotypical blacks that lived up there. Um, in the people who I knew in my neighborhood, you had a mom and a dad and the children, and they were conservative, in my opinion. You follow the rules, you follow the laws of the land, whatever. The fathers were there. They had their job. The women stayed at home. It was traditional, and it worked for them. But somehow things started happening, and it seems like yeah, I'm going to get to with CK, and almost forgot what CK was saying about um oppo- oh God. Oh God, here it goes again. I'm forgetting. Um, about about that R word, and abilities and systemic isms do they really apply? Um, so, but people can, I think what's happening, especially, they see like the black men or the black males in the community. I don't know, I think that there were a lot of anger, and the women were a lot of anger too. Um, I got into elementary school, let's say in the late 60s and into the early 70s. By the time I hit the fifth grade, um, yeah, I noticed in the fourth grade, that's as really far back I can remember. I mean, I remember a little bit of the third or second grade, but the the fourth grade, I remember a lot. We had a white teacher. She was extremely strict. Her name was Miss Russo. Yeah, interesting. Most of the teachers seemed to be all white in a black neighborhood. By that time, it's a black neighborhood. And again, I guess because what my mother looked like, I didn't think in terms of, okay, that's a white teacher and that's a black teacher. In my home, there were black skin and white skin and then brown skin, you know. So it was I wasn't raised in colorism in my household or by hair texture. That wasn't in my household. Um, oh, what happened now? Um, yeah, I noticed though that the people who are acting up in the classroom, like a lot of women, a lot of the females, the students, and by the time that was fourth grade, it was starting to act out. Fifth grade, it was full blown chaos. Um, yeah, there was a lot of radicalism. I think when King got unalived, especially members of the black community whose people are from the South, I think they got hit the hardest emotionally, and they gave up. They gave up. They said, "Why try?" And also Malcolm X, they gave up. And parents were teaching their black kids, at least according to this black kid who was telling everybody in the classroom. By the seventh grade, he said, "My mother told me not to act out in so and so's class because she's black. But you can act out in the white teacher's classroom." I kid you not. That was a foolish thing to teach your black son. You think my grandmother taught my father that? Hell no. My grandmother told my dark-skinned black father, "You got to be the best." And he was. So how do you think this guy probably ended up? Yeah, and this dude, I remember, somehow he had money for marijuana. Somehow, a lot of the troubled blacks, and back then, yeah, especially by the seventh grade, man, it was chaos. It was a brand new school, brand new, puppy clean, right? Uh, but it was one of the worst schools you can send your kid. It's just brand new. Um, by the time I entered the school might have been 2 years old. 2 years old. And it was a mixed race school. You had American blacks, you had Caribbean, you had Latin Americans, you had Asians, whether it be East Asia or South Asian, and you had whites. And many of the whites were from Greece. It was a fully integrated school, and American whites. It was fully integrated. And guess who were in the troubled people's class? Black people. black boys. They would say, "Oh, special ed." Yeah, they had special ed in the schools, really designed to. It was designed to keep black people down, and you did have some whites. And I remember I was in one remedial class. I didn't do well. It was a social studies class. I didn't do well in social studies because of isms. I didn't like to hear about history because I knew what they were going to talk about, and it made me depressed. It made me depressed. I didn't want to read it. I didn't want to read the book. I didn't want to study pain. I'm a very sensitive person. And this comedian shared similar sentiment. Monique, she shared a similar thing. She didn't do well in social studies. I didn't do well in social studies and English because I felt that they didn't want me to speak well. I was teased about my accent. I was teased by black people, black Americans, that you sound like a whitey, white person, and they would laugh at me. Yeah, even as an adult, I had a relative and saying just like that, you sound like a whitey. And here she's calling me because she had a problem, and here I was trying to help her out, and she's not focused on her problem, but I guess in her nervousness, she started lashing out on me what I sound like. And I didn't really know this particular relative. I met her at a funeral, a family funeral, and she went through a lot of stuff, and then she called me and acting foolish. But go figure. But this is a dynamics with many blacks in America that I think the civil rights movement was a detriment, and it made a lot of blacks, especially if you're a darker skinned black in New York City, you were self conscious, and you have new immigrants. Yeah, by 1970s, Asians were allowed in the country, and they filled all the classrooms. They were very focused, like in my mother's era, my parents, you come in and you do your homework, you study, and then you go to college and get a career. Ah, this new generation had the same spirit as my parents, but the new generation blacks, they just fell over. They just gave up. And so if you give up, giving up your seat, so to speak, to the new immigrants who are willing to put in 15 hours a day studying, doing homework, and you're not spending any time and you're dropping out of school. So, how could you be competitive and get into colleges? My father was one of the top people in his school. During the time of, in the country, legal segregation. But again, he's from New York. My parents, they didn't have um, uh, segregation like in the South. Things were integrated, but things were socially segregated. But the schools were integrated, the colleges were, the high schools were, and my father was just as competitive as those white people. Again, many of these people were, children of immigrants or first generation, right? But he did what he had to do. But by the 1970s, man, it was radicalism. And would say, what happened with this radicalism? I think it was all about the communists, the socialists that started permeating in the school system. Because, back in the day, you were able to pledge allegiance and say the word God, right? And I think you were able to pray in school, a morning prayer. But by this time, the 19th say, you better not. So things change. The structure changed, and public assistance came into view. And yes, I do think there was social engineering and these programs that on the surface seemed like was to help people, it made them rely on it. It made them, hey, more kids, more money from the government. You can't have a father at home. My father knew about poverty. He wouldn't let you forget it too. So what happened? These other things, these handouts came about, and people, blacks just got comfortable and made excuses and would say, "Oh, you acting like a white person." I remember hearing that. It was a black fellow saying it. So I said, "What are you saying? What are you really meaning? If you say I'm listening to this, what do you mean that the person thinks that they're white?" So what was being taught in the black community, the ghetto community, this ghetto-minded community, was that if you show intellect or if you get good grades, you're a white person. That's a bad thing. So they're teaching in the black community that to be dumb is to be black, and they wanted to be dumb. Real foolish people. But that's what was happening. And blacks stopped going to school. And the blacks that went to school, they went to school to what you call party. They went to school to party while those Asians went to school to get a degree so they could get a job. They were focused. But yeah, so with CK, as I'll call him, he was telling that black person in the audience who was asked him a question. It was a debate that oh God, I'm forgetting again. Why is this happening to me? I'm sorry. Oh, brother. I'm sorry about that, people. I can't stand when I forget. Um, but the dynamics of the school that you you entered, the guy, the black fellow was lying. They didn't call him the N word, and he was making an excuse. Um, the dynamics. What is it all about? Oh, he gave the statistics. CK gave the statistics. That's what it is. That he said that there there is more back in my like in my parents' day. Most black families were intact. 80% of the black family, the mom and dad, were at home. But it switched, it went reverse. Only 20% of black families are intact now. It did a complete opposite. So back in my parents' day, 80% of the people were married and parents together at least, while 20% were broken home. Civil Rights Act and post-civil rights, 80% no two parents at home, and only 20% intact. That would greatly interfere in anybody's outcome. When you only have one parent at home, and usually the mother head of household, no father head of household. This would, and again, women in general make less money than men. So poverty hits, dismay hits, but I think no matter what, you have to make it work for you. Like what my father, if my father just stayed at home and did nothing, my father had to go to the military, but he persevered. My father had the mindset you had to be good. He was real dark, my father, and real tall. So here, looking at this young man, I don't know how old that man was, but he could have been, he's college age. So let's just say he's mid 20s even. My father had babies. He had a wife, kids, had a full-time job, and went to college full-time at night. He had all that on his plate when you had legal segregation in the country. So here this fellow, uh, in this generation, is complaining about isms, and he act like a victim. And what happened? Apathy. They gave up. And then you had the music. You had CK also talked about the music. Do you think that he asked him, does the black culture in America, does it foster parents, a husband and a wife in the home, or does it poo-poo it? We all know what the answer was. So he had CK asked him direct questions. Would certain things promote unity in the black community? Does that music? But he kept making excuses, the black fellow. Everything was an excuse. Everything. Everything. And I said, wow. Wow. Oh, the sun is going to come up soon. Yeah, but it was like, wow. Look what's going on. I was amazed at CK's, who I'll call CK because I can't say Charlie's full name because I got X'd out of this live stream. That's why I had to redo it because it bounced it out. I was amazed with Charlie. He was sharp. He had a sharp mind. And he debated very respectfully. He was using the people's own words. And when he used statistics, people just say, oh, well, but it's systemic. It's systemic. It says, well, if it's systemic, how come that people were able, okay, a plane is coming. Sorry. So if it's so systemic, how is it that most blacks were together back in, uh, before the war, World War II? And people made more money back in the day than now. So how is it that segregation in the South, blacks did better? Blacks did better and were more intact and more educated under segregation than now. That hit me hard. I said, wow. How could you argue with that? How could you argue with that? On Father's Day. How could you say that, you were better educated? You were homeowners, also the homeowners. There were more homeowners. 70% of blacks in the past had their own home. 70%, my pastor had said back in the day. 70%. Now, only maybe 20% of black people have their own home. Wow. So what happened? How could discrimination, the KKK, under all that harassment, and you did better? And now you have all the civil rights on the table. You could legally sue somebody if you were discriminated based on your race, creed, color, national origin. Oh, I know of someone who was at a job. I mean, my Navy friend. I was in the Navy, and this guy, um, in classroom was telling me that, he was biracial. He had a white German mother and a black American father from Texas. And he was telling me the story that, like, he had his sister, and the mom had a job, I think it was at a bank, and his sister went to visit the mom. And people saw and found out that was the mother of the black girl. Yeah, even though you're mixed blood, they still call you black in America. So either way, uh, they were harassing the lady, the white lady on the job, were making phone calls to her and hateful. And so, yeah, and they were younger than me too. They were like 7 years younger. So this was someone, Uh, let's see. They're probably born the early 1970s. So either way, the mother sued and won. And my friend said she doesn't have to worry about money anymore. That's how he worded it, something like that. She doesn't have to worry about money. So there was a big, good for her, good for her. So yes, you do have isms that happen and targeted. But I can't shake off what CK said. It's so provocative. How could it be that under segregation, isms, um, KKK, and black people were together, families were together, kids went to school, they didn't have the as rampant drugs, all that. But civil rights movement was a demise for the black family, which ushered in apathy and self-loathing. Self-loathing. Yeah. So again, I don't come from the South. And I do have mixed blood in my genetics, very obviously so. So I was aware by the time, like, um, as you get older, you start to stand out, like, and people start, other blacks start, you're treated differently. I started, as I got older, I felt even more and more disconnected from the black community, not understanding. See, what was happening was what you call colorism within the black community. Colorism. Colorism, in my interpretation, is someone of black heritage, but they are usually mixed race, usually white. So maybe their hair might be a little straighter, their nose might be a little straighter, their skin a little paler, right? Their accent, maybe they went to school, and so their accent may not be a certain type of so-called black accent. And you were targeted. You're made fun of. You're told you're trying to act white. Um, they used to. I remember I used to a young black girl, a very dark-skinned black female. This was in elementary school. I was much. She was older. She might have been maybe 3 years older. So I was a little shrimp compared to her. She was a big girl. And she would walk up. I remember one of my brothers was there at the school, and my older brother. And he didn't say anything to me, but he was there. And then he walked away. And then the lady, the girl, walks up to me and starts stomping on my foot. She didn't seem to. Why was she doing that? There were jealousies in the black community. You know, if, you know, maybe she thought that he was my boyfriend. I don't know, but they didn't like it. It was a lot of jealousies within the black community, especially if you were darker skinned female. If you were a darker skinned female and you were, in contrast, lighter, uh, they would pick on you. Uh, it's just harassment. And I didn't understand what was happening. See, I understand now as an adult. Fast forward. What are the dynamics? That you're taught as a little black girl in these big urban cities that you're not loved, you're not wanted, uh, and you're considered ugly, and you're bad. You know, you hear the term bad hair. You know, I don't hear white people call people bad hair. I learned that term from other blacks. You got good hair, say indicating that the other got bad hair if you have African type of hair. So these things that you would say to yourself, you would attack yourself. You imploded. Think after Malcolm X and King, the black community in America imploded, especially if you're black from the South. You know, that heritage. The blacks from the Caribbean, they were just about, you know, just assimilating and moving up the ladder. But now I would say a lot of Caribbean people um, started, you know, as the generations moved on, started experiencing the same type of thing. They started doing the drugs. They started acting out in the school, single head of household, all that. It happened, and it's sad. Yeah, it was horrible. I did speak out one time. You know, I was starting to get angry, and I kept the information. You know, I kept it to myself. Um, I, d- I didn't understand why people and the people who were bothering me in school were black people, usually very dark-skinned black people. It's usually almost synonymous. Dark-skinned black person, violence. You did have in my school, I mean, not, of course, not all of them, but it just those who were in general. You had some who were my color, caramel color, who were edgy also. They were crazy also. It was an edginess, an anger, this intense anger. And they loved her. This one girl by the name of Cheryl, I remember her. I actually liked her, you know. But man, almost every day she'd be fighting. So we were about maybe 11 years, let's see, how old? Uh, mm, 11 maybe. 10, 11 years old. Every day a fight. Every day. I remember her. Yeah, she was in my junior high school too. And this other, oh no, I'm getting confused. One of these other girls, she was nice. She was a dark skinned black girl. She was nice, you know. She was quiet, relatively quiet. And she was nice. But by the time junior high school came, we were in the same junior high school. This other person, and she and another girl. I knew of her, but she wasn't in my elementary school. But she and another black girl jumped a white girl. Why? Because she was white. Period. Yeah, these schools, this junior high school that I went to was extremely violent. I had such fear being at school. Um, I was intimidated. I didn't have a fight in that school, but I lived in fear. I had such fear. And I started to develop fear of black people. It was almost synonymous. I did have black friends in that school. It was the eighth grade. It was a group of us. It was me and two other black Americans, as far as I remember. A white girl and then a Colombian girl who could look past as white. We were all friends. And so our friendship was just basically, we were just friends. Um, but yes, they did separate me from them. Yeah, unfortunate with, I know it sounds like going back and forth. Is there racism or not racism? It's a blend. It's a blend. In that situation, yeah, we were all talking in class, but I was not the major one. But yes, I was talking in classroom. And so they removed me and the other black girl, but not the two Caucasian looking girls, the Greek and then the Colombian that could pass as white. They removed me and the other girl, and they put us in the overflow waste class, the dread class, yeah. Oh God. That's when hell really broke loose. Yeah, that other class, it was fun. Yeah, I mean, school for me was so violent, violent intimidation. And so here I was in a classroom for the first time. I had friends. It was five of us. And yes, we did talk in classroom. I wasn't trying to be disruptive, but I wasn't the most disruptive person. But they decided to remove me and the other black girl. And not the ones that really did all the loud. Yeah. And I feel like I knew I was being punished. That's how I felt punished that I was moved to that class. Yeah, they would do that. If you challenge a white teacher, they'll get rid of you. Yep, and I learned that in the job market too. If a white person feels challenged by you or you ruffle their feathers, yeah, you get canned. You get fired right away. Yep. Um, but at the same time, in that same school, we had Asian students. I remember the first person I met in junior high school, where I met people, my first Asian that I remember, was my seventh grade class. She was a Hindu, it turned out. I knew they said India. She's from India. I said, Mom, I met a girl by the name of, she's from India. Blah, blah. I remember that, the conversation. Well, this girl had a mindset, boy. Yeah, and the last name is a very affluent name in India. The Patel family is like an aristocracy type family. You think they're going to act out in classroom? You better not. Yeah, she came from India. And she was about studying. Yeah, she sat next to me and she wanted me to test her in the spelling words and the vocabulary words. Oh, yeah, this girl was highly competitive. And here we're in the same classroom. It was an integrated class. Yeah, whites, blacks, Asian. Yeah. Most of the teachers were white, but I had a black teacher. Was she so? Oh, I forget. I think she was social. I forget her name. She was quiet spoken, that teacher. She was nice. Oh yeah. So this school was a school of people like myself in the sense that first or second, new the first, second generation American or immigrants. And yeah, you did your work. They were quiet. All the Asian kids were quiet. And the white kids that were in there, they were quiet too. They just sit there in classroom. But who acted out? Who acted out? The Black Americans. And back then, the West Indians were quiet too. Yeah, we did look funny. We have our hair funny. Well, by that time, my hair was cut into an afro, and that was hell for me. Yeah, I had a family member that cut my hair. So I just want to see something with your hair. And she starts chopping off my hair with a scissor. That traumatized me too. That was a big trauma for me. And then I had to go to school. I it was done in the summer, so school was out, and then I entered the seventh grade, and I just felt it traumatized me, and I just didn't know who I was anymore, and my mother said, "I'm not gonna comb your hair anymore." My mother didn't like afros. She didn't like me with it, and she couldn't relate to me anymore with this afro that I didn't ask for. Yeah, so I felt like I was being, I felt I was caught in the middle of everything. So here, um, I was a person of color. Have a mom that looks like what she looks like, and have a dad that looks like what he looks like. And then I it seemed like all of a sudden, well, now I have to learn how to comb my hair, and I don't have hair like my mom. I have afro hair, and so I watch the how the black girls did they, people who had my hair. How did they do their hair? I had to learn. I had also watched my brothers how they combed their hair. Now my brothers all had afro, so I had to learn how to take care of afro with my brother, watching what my brothers did, or other things with the girls in school, how to braid hair. And it was very hard for me, seventh grade, extremely hard. But I think school, junior high school is bad for everybody. You're going through puberty and things like that. It's hard. Um, so yeah, so I had to learn about, how to develop me. How do I uh, how do I fix my hair? Hair is a big thing amongst black people. Historically, everything. I didn't know how to, as a black girl, I didn't know how to comb my hair. I didn't know. And I really didn't care about my hair back then. I wasn't into looks back then. I lived with a whole bunch of brothers. And so I was really, now I was never a tomboy, but in general, guys don't really care about what they look like. And I hung around them, so I didn't really, I didn't want to put attention to myself. I was extremely, extremely withdrawn and shy. So, there was a lot of intimidation in the school, and people, people just fighting all day. Uh, I didn't have much learning. Well, I should say I didn't discipline myself enough to learn. Now that Indian girl, boy, uh, she was something else, and I think she got a medal or something. Yeah, you had people in that school that got medals. They did their work. You find if you're disruptive in classroom or fighting all day, you're not going to do well. You probably don't have family at home saying you better behave in school or else you don't get bring home there, you're gonna get beaten. Right? And these rowdy kids, they would do their they brought in drugs. But by the eighth grade, what's the eighth? Yeah, eighth grade, they were bringing in marijuana, and all these kids that had the marijuana, they got free lunch. Yes, they did. Oh, these poor kids, but they got money for marijuana. Yeah, I remember that. My family as poor, well, my father, we were working, my family working class. My mother, by this time, I was in junior high school. She may have gotten a part-time job just to get out the house. She doesn't have to baby us anymore. We're I'm a young, a preteen. And a teenager. So my mother got her first little job since the kids when I was 10 years old. It was part-time just to get out of the house, but she came home and she cooked dinner. Okay, we kids, we cleaned the house on the weekends. And on weekend, my mother would go buy the food. So she cooked the dinner for us. Sometimes I would help out. But my mother, she did the cooking, the dinner, and she'll buy the food. And the kids on the weekends would clean the house. What else? So there was structure in our house, um, but I was very depressed. I wasn't motivated in school. Uh, and the kids in junior high school, okay, seventh and eighth grade, it was hell. But those kids, I'm remembering now. Who is doing well in these schools? Okay. And then, as I said, I started to learn about isms for the first time, really learned about race and ism. And that I started to be afraid by the eighth grade when I was graduating. Okay. Um, I had some friends that I told you about. Two of my friends, the girl from Colombia and the girl of Greek parents, they were going to, they were real fun. They were fun at that time. The two of my black friends went to a different school, high school. Uh, and I was to go to this other school, what's called a black school. It was considered the worst school in New York City, at least one of the worst. It was, I'm going to say, Andrew Jackson High School. And I was just so depressed. And I said out loud to my father, yeah, sometimes I would speak out. I mean, I spoke, I mean, not disruptively, but I spoke. And I said, if I have to go to Andrew Jackson High School, I'm not going to go to school. He knew the deal. My father was in the school um, industry. He knew the deal. He knows all the story. And I was just so, because that's where all the bad kids, the so-called bad kids went into. So by the time I was to graduate from the eighth grade, I learned, I'm saying it, I'm going to say, I learned by the eighth grade that blacks was associated with violence and whites weren't. And any non-black was associated with, you know, better living, better neighborhoods, everything. I knew for me, if I was to go to, I just would cut school. Um, I didn't cut school in junior high school. No. Um, only it was, I thought I was going to get beat up one day. It was it Christmas Eve or something like that, and something like that. It was the day before a holiday, and I I I left on my lunch hour or something and didn't return. And I went home. I went straight home because I thought the girl was going to. Yeah, that's the only time that I so-called skip a class. I didn't return. I didn't go to lunch because I thought she was going to beat me up. Yeah, I was so fearful. Yeah, I was afraid of these girls. Yes, that girl was my complexion, but she was a street girl, boy. Yeah. Um, so that's the only time. See, I wanted to disclose that because I can't say that I never skipped school. I just that one day at it was just before the holiday. Uh, I skipped lunch and I went straight home. I just was so fearful. That was the only time I ever skipped school. But I never hung out, anything like that. Never, never. And and I'm fortunate. I am fortunate that that didn't happen. The people who hung out, where did these girls go? The shopping mall. I didn't have money to shop. I was a poor girl. Well, I shouldn't say a poor girl. I just didn't have money. Uh, well, I had some pocket. My father was very, um, he wasn't a big giver. You know, we had to do our chores. Back in the seventh grade, I might have got 25 cents allowance, something like that. So that's not a lot of money. 25 cents allowance in the seventh grade. I had friends that got $2 a week. No, this one girl, she got $2 every day. You know, but see, all my needs were met. I lived in a house and I got food at home. And I said I didn't have any real needs. I didn't have any needs. But these poor families, boy, they were about um, materialism. Poor people are about poor-minded people about materialism. And the black community that I lived in Queens, you know, all the street kids, they had all the, remember pro kids? They had all the pro kids. They had the pro kids. I couldn't, my family couldn't afford that. My mother wouldn't buy that. My mother was very economical. And she bought the cheapest thing that she can find. Yeah. And she shopped at thrift stores. So yeah, I had a lot of clothes. But I was extremely skinny back then. So a lot of my clothes fit me kind of baggy. I mean, the girls, the black girls, black American girls back then, boy, they ate their food. Eat that with the Southern food, boy. They had the big girls. They had big boobs. That girl, big boobs, and a big boom boom. And honey, they filled out every inch of their clothes. Yeah, these were big girls. And you know, in hindsight, what I think about the dynamics that might have been happening to these girls. Yeah, the street girls there, they were developed. When I think back, the seventh grade, eighth grade, oh, even fifth grade, the girls, yeah, they were fully developed girls. And they were bigger. Yeah, you know what could have been happening? They could have been getting aid by their family members, their pastor, their neighbor. That happens a lot in the black community. Traumatization and the sexualization of black girls. This happened. And yeah, I was victim by that too. Yeah. It did traumatize me, but that's also why I was very withdrawn too. But even before it happened, I was very withdrawn. There was a lot of intimidation in the house. I feared, it's like there's really nowhere to hide. I felt trauma in the house and trauma in school. So, you know, you just, you know, I stayed a lot. I stayed at home. I stayed in my room a lot for my safety. And what else? Yeah, so back in with the girls. I think what happened, I'm not trying to be insensitive. Please forgive me if sometimes I guess maybe my thoughts can sound kind of, insensitive. But it goes up and down emotion. It was emotional roller coaster when I think about these girls. Um, but when my adult and rational part kicks in, then I say it more compassionately. But at the time, I hated these girls. I hated them. But as a woman now, as a 60 plus year old woman, I have compassion and empathy and sympathy for them. Um, no woman wants to hear that they're ugly, no matter what color. No woman, the culture uh, puts down itself. Yeah, the media too is part of it. The media, these are movies, TV shows from the 1970s. I think they were devised to, um, what's the word? Trigger black people to get us angry at the white man. Yeah, made you feel like a victim. This was very prominent. Yeah, I hate those shows. I watched them, like the Sanford and Son, What's Happening, all I watched them all. I didn't like them. And it made me feel I didn't like myself. And that was a big part of my life. I didn't look in the mirror growing up. I didn't look at myself in the mirror for years, for some time, quite, I should say, for quite some time. I didn't really know what I looked like. And this incident happened to me, part of my wake up call in my journey, my spiritual journey. Um, I was going on the bus, so I had to be a teenager by that time. Uh, and I said, oh, because I saw part of something of color. I said, oh, I don't want to look at that person. I was tired of looking at black people because I was afraid that with blackness meant something bad was going to happen to you, or that I would witness something bad happening. And then I looked up again in the mirror. The bus had like a little rear view, those mirrors, the side mirrors. And I looked again. It was me. It was me. It was me in that mirror. It was part of my wake up call. I didn't want to look at cause so just imagine white people out there seeing all these bad things what blacks are doing. You don't want to see a black face. I didn't want to see my own. And then I walk out of the bus. Oh, yes, I thought it went through my mind. Then I looked up again and found it was me, my reflection. That is a big wake up call, people. That one is a big wake up call. I wish people were listening to this live stream right now. See, you know, those who need to hear what I have to say will hear it. And I notice a lot of things like that in my channel about accountability and being honest about the race situations. We don't want to like hear about it. But I speak it. We have to speak it. And like CK had to speak about it. He spoke in a dialogue. He spoke in dialogue. And I didn't know him, CK. And post mortem, I listened to some of his debate. That man was superb. And I needed to hear what he had to say to that black fellow, you know, about how can you call it systemic racism if you're saying the time of segregation, Jim Crow, blacks did better. Blacks were a family unit.